Hey, this is Josh, and I had a question from one of the patrons, and I wanted to try to cover it. So this is a common kind of issue for people just learning the system. You'll see this, the elbow RP handle is down here, which is obviously not what you'd normally want. So let's talk about why that is. So on this video, I'm going to cover this, and also the user had some questions about the spine placement. So spine control placement, so I'm going to talk about that too. So here's the template. So first of all, let's talk about this concept. So when you have a chain of joints, they typically have a plane, a rotation plane that they're going to rotate along. That's that's usually what the RP handle is for. That's what that solver is a rotation plane solver. So in the docs, I'm gonna have a link to this in the video here. But so this rotation plane. So here's an arm, and so we have our RP handle, which I'm going to show you in a second. And so this is what happens when I'm going to show this functionality that happens, but this is the basic concept. So we have a plane that we want these three joints to rotate cleanly along. We want to define what that elbow is, so the elbow is going to be over here somewhere. And if we wanted it over here, we'd aim the RP handle this way. But this is kind of what's happening in this next thing I'm going to show you here. So I have added a visualizer for this to help. So if I go to right arm and go block, pre-rig, visualize RP position, you'll see that it's like, yep, this is where it's going to be. Well, then we got to look at why that is. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to look at the RP handle. And let's see. It's a little dense, so I'm going to go ahead and go Viz, Focus, and that's going to hide these other blocks. So I'm just looking at this block, and so you'll see here's the culprit here. So the RP handle for this arm is down. It needs to be this way because we want it to be out that elbow. So depending on the model, you're going to rotate that however you want that plane to be. And then what I'm going to do is recalculate that. Pre-rig. I'm just going to tear this off. And so now you'll see that the elbow is kind of a lot more where I want it to be. So that's better. I'm also going to look at something else though. So we want to make sure we have a little bit of a bend in here. So I'm not sure if this is straight. So I like to put just a little bit of a bend in my arm when I'm going to be doing, an arm. It helps the IK solver to work. So even the slightest little bend in there, you're just going to get weird results if stuff isn't exactly where it's supposed to be. But you'll note that, so if I had a funky bend like this, where it's kind of, off in a couple places, if I want to get that back aligned, there's a functionality here to snap to the RP. And so that means to snap to the rotation plane. So what that means is that image I just shown, that rotation plane, it's snapping to that plane. So it's getting the closest point along that plane from its current position. It snaps to that so that it still has your bend, but it gets back to that nice clean RP plane so that you get better deformation. I would note to this patron, so this clav's a little bit weird. Typically you're going to want your clav to be, turn off geo selection. You know what, the clav to be more down a bit. So think about that arc that's created. So if you have that higher pivot, and maybe this is what you want, but if you rotate down, this arm is going to immediately go into, here, let me just show that. That's actually easier to show with the ball. So let's just create a ball, create a sphere, and then I'm going to snap it here. All right. Oh, I turned off my geo selection. There we go. All right. So think about that. So duplicate that. And I'm going to put this kind of where the, I'll just snap it to this one too. So snap. You can also use this snap point. And then scale this one down. I'm going to parent this to this so we can kind of see this visually. So when I rotate this, this position is going to make that arm kind of go out when it rotates up. And this one, and so as you rotate down, it's going to rotate that arm into the body. So if that's what you want, that's fine. Typically, what I do is I want to have this clav to orient to be kind of more in the center. On a cartoony character like this, I'd have it more in the center, so that when I rotate that, it's going up, and it's not going immediately into the body as much, just because of where that pivot is in that arc. So just think about that. If you want it there, that's fine. I'm not going to mess with it on your version, but just give that a thought, I would say. And then once I have that, I'm going to push that to the other side, so that left arm will have the same setup. Then the spine, so let's go ahead and clear that focus, and let's go to the spine. And so the file that you gave me wasn't pre-rigged, so I went ahead and just did a base pre-rig. So almost like this cog, pick walk up once to get the DAG. And remember that the cog has your shape, and it also has the actual DAG, which is a separate control. Let me turn off this. Well, no, I want that actually. So you'll see this is kind of where the hips are in this character. So I want to, that probably is going to be where I want this to be. So for this build, I'm going to, put my DAG there for my cog. And then I'm going to want to put, so remember on a spine, turn off geoselection. And I'll go to turn off the light so we can see a little bit better. I'm going to probably want this handle to be about the same spot. Typically I like that in the same spot. It doesn't have to be. I've done some characters where I put the spine chain further back, like a traditional. For more cartoony stuff, I tend to keep it more in the center. But again, that's just personal preference. So I'm going to move that up a hair. So that's going to be where the pelvis is, and this is going to be where the hip is, this first one. So also note on your DAG, so the DAG for the cog, so if you want the orientation of the hips to be to world, you're going to want to rotate that. Until I get a better way to do that, you just need to note that. So this is the axis control or shape that we use for a bunch of stuff, so you'll just want to do that. I've been meaning to change that to a point constraint so it doesn't rotate with it. I need to go back and do that maybe for this next build. And also for the your upper one as well. You can change that if you want. And remember, so once you have those handles, I'm going to go ahead and do an even distribution between those. So snap, arrange, linear even. That's just going to make sure that those are between these 3 points, that one's on that midpoint between those two. I can change it if I wanted to, so like I might want to move this down a bit and do the chest a little bit more. It just depends on what you want. But that functionality is like this. Again, so snap, arrange, even. Another note, so I covered this in the class, but you do have two handles. So this is the actual joint handle, and this is the DAG, and this is for like the control setup. This framework is just here because I wanted to play with having, if I wanted to have my DAG out here and the joint over here. That's why there's two. But typically at this point in how we're doing things, I'm just using the main one, but that's what that is for. So cool. Oh, and the leg was the same thing. So let's go ahead and look at that. So clear that focus. And let's go to the right leg. I'm just looking at that leg. So again, I'm going to visualize that RP. And it looks like it's fine. So you mentioned that this was doing weird stuff. So what I would probably be checking is if there's a bend in here. If you have a perfectly straight joint chain, it just does funky stuff. So that's my guess of what it is. So I'm going to snap to the RP. I'm going to put a little bit of a bend in it and just make sure that that's how I want it. Cool. Just so we don't have funkiness, I'm going to make sure that we're still in there. Yeah, we are. And then I'm going to push this to the other side. I'm going to go ahead and do a build of this. And I'm going to pause it while I'm doing that. So I push that, clear that focus. And I'm going to push, I'm going to save this. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to push everything to skeleton. I'm going to do a build and I'll come back. I'm going to turn off the face stuff because I don't really want to look at that right now for this build. But as a reminder, I'm going to be using the, let me get this set up and I'll show you the build. Okay, so I got everything at skeleton state here. A couple things I noticed, you might just want to play with this. So this pivot is a little bit low for what I would probably consider for the leg. It may be fine for this asset because of how it's structured, but typically I'd want to have that higher up. And what you can do, well, I mean, you just move this up if you want to do it, but if I wanted to make sure I could keep this point, you could just constrain this to a locator, or you could just lock it, and then if I move this up, I could just go back to this object and snap it back to its target. That's kind of a workflow. For now, I'm just going to leave this, but it's just something to note. On a little game jam, we had some issues with the frog leg bending how I wanted. So I did like 4 or 5 builds with the legs, playing with the proportions until I got them how I wanted them, and then I pushed that back to the geo. I know this is already fixed geo, but it's just a thought that sometimes you need to iterate through stuff to get the best deformation. Okay. I'm going to push this to, one other thing. This is new as of 2020.2.3 release. So if I want to do a pre-check on my rig, I'm going to go to rig Prechecks, and then I'm going to look at my script editor here, and I'm going to make sure that, I have a fail here. And so this would have been a failed build, and so this is just a new way to check them all. So this says net control count must be less than the joint count. So I'm going to look at the head, see why that would be failing. So you have 3 joints and 5 controls. So yeah, what you probably meant was 5. Well, you have to have at least 5 joints for that setup to work. Yeah, you have a bunch of handles in here. I wouldn't do it this way. I'd do it another way, and I'll talk to you about that. Well, I can just talk about it now. So I would probably just have the same number of joints, but have just 3 controls. This is going to be overkill, I think you're going to find. However, if you like it, that's fine. So I'm going to leave that, but I need to re-joint that. So now I got all the joints I need, and now I can pre-check that, and then check the script editor, and now it's passed. Cool. Let's see. Yep, I'm gonna go ahead and push this to a build. So again, how I do that, I need to save this file so that MyPy can find it, and I'm gonna go to batch. I'm gonna send to MyPy, and then I'll be back in a minute. Hey, I noticed a build fell, so I came back to the file. I came back and looked at the file. I noticed something. So this is not how these joint orientations should look on the arm. Y should be up like the legs. See, the legs are Y up, Z down the chain, and X out. Our arm is not, and that's because our arm is wrong. So this needs to be up. This is our up for this limb. So that's the up, and then we have our RP. So I'm going to push this to the other side. I'm going to reload this. Push. And then I'm going to, both of these have to rejoin them. Yeah. Cool. So now see that those chains are, that's how we expect them to be. That's what they should look like. So now I'm going to save this. Let's 1 second. This looks, oh, yeah, let's fix this. So it's just the wrist. It's not a huge deal. It's just, this whole limb is off, so these are just off. So I'm just going to rotate these. -90. And then I'm going to push that to the other side. Push. And then annular. I'm not familiar with that naming convention. Index, middle. That's the ring? Interesting. I've never heard that. I'll have to look that up. Alright, so that all looks good. I'm going to save, and I'm going to again send this to build, and then I'll be back. Alright, we got to build. Let's see what we got. First thing I'm going to do is gather my blocks so I can hide them. And let's look at stuff. So we've got RPs here looking good. There we go. So there's the elbow coming out the back like we'd expect. Yep, and let's see your leg. Yep, everything looks as I'd expect it to. So I would take a look at things. This build is up for you, patron, but not for other people. But again, I might rethink your, there's a lot of neck controls. I'd probably just do, like I said, just one neck control. Maybe with the mid, and then just play with it, give it a look, and then your clav. That may be what you want, but just think about that, and then check this, your hip stuff, see if that's really what you want as well. And then if you don't like the hip placement, you can check that out. But it's a good build. This is up for you, and that's it for now. Thanks all.